Hello and welcome. I am your host of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Author Karen E. Osborne. I have five novels out. The latest is Justice for Emerson. I am so glad that you're here. This is a space for readers and writers to come together and talk about books. So you get to say hello again to Peggy Joque Williams. Hey, Peggy.
Hey Karen, how are you? It's nice to see you again.
Very nice to see you again. Did I pronounce your middle name correctly?
I think you pronounced it the Spanish way, so it's Peggy Joque Williams.
Ah, thank you. We practiced. I
Hmm.
still got it. I'm so sorry.
It's all
Well,
right.
we are delighted to have Peggy back with us today. So when you met her, Courting the Sun had just come out. And now she has the sequel to it, the next book in the series. And so I thought it would be good if we started with the first one, just to remind everybody. And you guys can go back and look at the original interview. You can just type her name in the search on my website and it'll pop up. But just if we could just take a minute and you remind us of the setting and the premise of uh, of Courting the Sun. And then we'll talk about Breaking the Sun.
So let me say first that I always envisioned both books as being one. And when I
Mm.
started out writing it, and there was so much that I could have Sylviane do in France, which is the setting of that book, 17th century France, and she goes to the court of Louis the 14th. And it became evident very quickly that it was going to have to be two books. So, Courting the Sun, she's very naive. She gets invited to the court of Louis the 14th. She gets involved in all the partying and the glitz and the glamour, and then things start to go south. And eventually, I will just give a spoiler because the two books go together. She gets banished from France in order to save her head.
To save her head. Yes, back in those days, it was off with the head.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. And so she got banished to where?
She got banished to New France, which of course we call Canada. And she specifically went to the city, well, the village of Quebec. And so here's the new book, Braving the Dawn. And it's a novel of New France. And in this book, she travels across the ocean with a group of young women that have actually been sponsored by the king. He wanted his own colony in New France, the way the British had theirs and the Spanish had theirs. And all he had were the soldiers and the fur traders and just a very few families. So he recruited young women between the ages of 15 and 25 to go over to Quebec and Montreal and marry his soldiers and the fur traders and whatever eligible men were there and grow him a colony. And in a 10-year period from 1663 to 1673, about 750 young women took him up on this. And it was a very successful program. Quebec grew, Montreal grew, all the little villages in between. And I am descended from 23 of those women. So I have a vested interest in this story. However, Sylviane has a different backstory. She is unlike any of my ancestors in France. My ancestors did come from France, um, but her story is pure fiction. When she gets to Canada, her story becomes very much more like that of my ancestors. And the things she goes through, the things that happen to her, um, she is sort of ancillary to the official Fedora that are going over. Um, and so there's similar expectations. They expect her to get married. She doesn't want to. She's not had a good marriage in France. So, but she matures quite a bit in this story. And this one ends up being a love story with an interesting, very interesting ending.
Oh, cool, 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 cool. So, tell us a little about Sylvia and how she's grown or changed from, tell us a little bit about her character
Mhm.
when in the first book, and then how has she changed? How has she grown? How much time has passed between the ending of that one and the beginning of this one?
So in the first book, she starts out, she's quite young. She's 16 when she goes to court, um, and she's very naive and very impressionable. She has big dreams about living in a big mansion, marrying somebody wealthy, and she doesn't quite realize. I mean, there's a young man who's very much in love with her, but she doesn't realize what she already has and what family really means. And so that book takes place in about a 2 year time period. By the time she goes over to Canada, she's still fairly young. She's only about 19, but she has matured. She has grown. Um, she's learned a lot about life. She's learned about, um, expectations of people that are sometimes at one point she has been a pawn of the king, and she's learned some rough lessons. So when she gets to Canada, she becomes a person who takes control of her own life, her own fate, and she makes her own decisions. The nice thing in Canada is the young women who go over, those who choose to marry, and I think pretty much they all did, they get to choose their husbands. Well, she turns down that opportunity at first. She has some experiences. She learns about friendship. She encounters different people. She encounters native people there and different ways of thinking, different belief systems. And so she grows emotionally, but also, I think, spiritually, and has to make some pretty tough decisions by the end of the book.
Wow, yeah. So so the women that went over there,
Mhm.
this was all a willing decision. This wasn't
Right.
trafficking or this was people willingly going.
They were willingly going.
And it was for money?
Yes, well, the king paid their passage, and
Yeah.
most of these women couldn't afford a dowry to marry in France. So he offered them a dowry. He gave them a trousseau. If they had 10 or more babies, he gave them a bonus. And
Oh,
they did have, by and large, many, many, many babies. Um, and so yeah, it was the young women who went just didn't have the means to a good life, um, the means to get married. And when they got there, what is fun, and it's in my book, is that there was already a convent established there. The nuns and the Jesuit priests went over way early. And the nuns would grab them when they come off the boat because had been at sea for what, 2 months, and they were dirty and grimy and um, ill-fed by that time. And they took them into the convent and they cleaned them up and they fed them and they gave them a few lessons in wifery. And then they called the young men in. And the men, the king had an incentive for them. He said, if you do not get married within a reasonable amount of time, he would take away their hunting and fishing privileges. So, and the men, by and large, I mean, young women come, they're going to go. And so
interested.
the nuns would have them come in, and it'd be like speed dating. The young women got to interview them and decide who they wanted to marry. And that was for real. So I use
Oh,
that in the book.
yeah. So did you always know this about your relatives? Was this family lore that had gotten passed down the generations, or did you
No.
uncover this in some special way? Tell us about that.
So I didn't have much of an idea of my cultural heritage at all growing up. Um, and it wasn't until in the 1980s, I had started doing some genealogy in the 1970s, but what I was doing was just finding dates trying to go farther, farther, farther back. And
Mhm.
somebody in the 80s had mentioned, "Oh, do you know about the Fedora? You should write about them." And what he said was, "They're the cast-off mistresses of the king." And I thought, "Oh, how can I write a story about that?" And of course, I didn't even know how to write a novel. But when I started researching in the, like right about 2015, 2016, and starting going deeper into my own history and discovered that I had a Fedora, and we went to Quebec, and I was so proud I have a Fedora, and they're like, "Yeah, we all do." Well, and then I discovered I have more and more and more. And then the idea for the story came. And so as I'm researching for the story, I'm learning more about their lives and more about what things were like. So the genealogy helped me get into the story, but the story helped me find the stories of my ancestors, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. That's such a gift.
Hmm.
So many of us don't know,
Right.
how far back, how that we could, they know a couple of generations. They don't know way, way back. So that's exciting. And then to be able to make it come alive
Mhm.
in two wonderful books. I read the first one, which I loved. I'm going to read this one because I know I will love this
Thank
as
you.
well. I'm confident. But I did love uh, Sylvia, and I just thought she was such a, you were rooting for her. You wanted her to succeed. You wanted her to, even when her naivete, you know what I'm saying,
Yes.
being naive, when that got in the way sometimes.
Hmm.
And just looking forward to her growing up and being successful and all of the intrigue and everything of the first one. So I am really looking forward to reading your new one.
Oh, thank you.
So uh, tell us a little bit more about the cast of characters, right? So
Hmm.
she is in Quebec, and who's around her? Who are some of the really important people? And you said that there's romance. So
Hmm.
tell us a little bit about that.
So the first thing people always ask me is if Etienne, the young man who loved her, will come into this book. And I will say that at some point he does. I won't say any more than that. Um, when she gets to Quebec, it's very small. It's maybe, 1,000, 1,200 people.
Mm,
And she's just come from Paris. And even her hometown in France, Amiens, France, was probably 30 or 40,000 people. So now she's in this tiny little village. And she didn't want to have anything to do with the nuns again, but there they are. And they're the Ursuline nuns like she'd had before. And those were very, as I said, they were very real people who really helped out there. She gets involved. There's a hospital there already, and that hospital was run by the Augustinian nuns. And that hospital still exists today. And the convent that the Ursuline nuns were in, it's grown. They've both grown. They've gotten bigger, but the buildings are both still there. The hospital's still in use. Um, and so I created, of course, some fictional characters, and she's in the convent. The convent serves both the young French girls and some native indigenous girls. And one of the things I learned about the area is there wasn't just one tribe or nation of native peoples there. There were several different ones that were there. The ones I featured in my book were the Wendat. The French called them the Huron Indians.
mm,
And I also have a little bit of the Ojibwe. The Iroquois were there. The Iroquois had five distinct nations. And the French got along with the Wendat and the Ojibwe and the other ones that were there. They didn't get along with the Iroquois. The Iroquois didn't even get along with the other native tribes. So that was very interesting for me to learn. There was a governor there that I used the real name of the real governor. And there was a gentleman who was called the Intendant. And the governor was in charge of the military and the forts and things like that. The Intendant was the financial and the judicial administrator of New France. And his name, the one at the time, was Jean Tillon. So he's featured in the book. And I did a lot of research on him, but there wasn't much I could find, particularly not in English. There was some in French, but he was never married, to my knowledge. And so I kind of created a personality for him that is, fairly important in the book to Sylvian's perception of him.
Yeah,
So,
isn't that the best fun, writing historical fiction that you can put in real people, but you also can make up all kinds of stuff because
right,
we just have the information we have. And making up stuff is what we love to do.
right, right. And I was wanting to be respectful of
Mhm.
the history of the Canadian people.
Yeah,
I wanted to be respectful of the history of the Indigenous people there, the First Nations people. Um, you know, but also the reality that it wasn't smooth going. There were wars that went on and there was fighting that went on and that sort of thing. So it
yeah,
was creating
yeah,
that kind of balance.
yeah, yeah. Being respectful but true,
Hmm.
authentic.
Yeah.
And I totally get that. So, now that you have two books out, two novels out over the course of what, 3 years, 4 years,
About
because
four
it
years.
took, I
Yeah.
know it took time to get them all written. Did you learn anything about yourself that you didn't know, or did it reconfirm something about yourself?
Well, yeah, the first thing is I learned I can write a novel. I had been doing other kinds of writing all my life. I wrote nonfiction things. I wrote, oh, like video scripts for corporate and educational videos, that kind of thing. Um, I had actually co-written two mystery novels with my sister-in-law. Um, co-wrote some screenplays. But when I wrote Courting the Sun, that was my first solo novel. But I learned from everybody I co-wrote with. Every bit of writing I did along the way contributed to this. And I think what surprised myself was being able to put out a second novel. And now people are asking for a third, and I've got ideas for one. I just haven't quite found the through story for it yet. So maybe
Isn't
that'll
that
come.
wonderful, though? People are already asking. This one just came out in
Mhm,
January, and people are already saying, "What's next? What's next?"
mhm.
So
Yeah.
that is very encouraging, isn't it? That's what we love. We love hearing. One of this is, what are you reading?
Hmm.
What are you writing? So have you read anything recently, or not so recently, that you can recommend to our audience?
So the book I'm in the middle of right now is The Frozen River. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's
Hmm.
historical fiction, but it's also mystery. And it's by Ariel Lohan, I think her name is. And it's quite popular in some circles. And it's the story of a midwife in the late 1700s who needs to solve a crime. They found a dead body in the river, but there's a young, uppity doctor who's Harvard trained who thinks he knows, and she keeps butting heads with him
Hmm.
as she's trying to figure out what happened to this person who they found in the river, and that's been intriguing for me. Um, and I
Where
just
is it set? Where's the story
oh,
set?
it's set in New England. Um,
Okay. Mhm.
I want to say Connecticut or Maine. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm about halfway through that one. And then I just finished a contemporary novel that I think will come out this spring by Suzanne Groves. Have you? I don't.
Yes, yes, she said
Well,
we're in a writing group together.
okay. Well, she
Yeah,
has one called The Pebble in the Pond,
yes.
and it's a wonderful story, and it's so
Mhm.
affirmative. It's not always happy all the way through, but oh my gosh, it is so affirmative. And it's about a woman who, and it's contemporary, a woman who she and her husband move into a community where there are a lot of old money people, already established wealthy people, and she's kind of out of her league, and she gets caught up in the social rivalries that go on and ends up being kind of a pawn in them. But then there's some family secrets that happen, and she grows throughout the story in wonderful ways. And the story just has the most affirmative ending. So I really
Yes,
like
it
that.
comes out in April.
April, the
Yes,
pebble in
The
the
Pebble in
pond.
the Pond by Suzanne Groves.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I'm gonna look for the frozen river.
the frozen river. Yep.
Yeah, that sounds really intriguing. Sounds like my kind of book too. So this has been so fun being with you, Peggy.
Yeah.
Now we've got everybody interested and everybody wants to be able to buy your books. And you
Hmm.
guys know you can buy them on Amazon. You can buy
Yes.
it on Barnes and Noble in your local independent store.
Yes.
You can go to the library. And if in any of those places
Hmm.
it's not out, just go ask for it because that helps us so much. Go ask for it at the library. Go ask it
Hmm.
for it go to each of the stores and
Yes.
ask for it so that they will bring it out. And then please, please write reviews. Please write and post reviews. But in addition to that, Peggy, how can people be in touch with you? How can they follow you?
So probably the easiest way,
Peggy is frozen.
um, and um, also I'm on Facebook.
So
Has
could you just repeat that because you froze
Oh,
for a minute?
yeah, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
My website is peggywilliamsauthor.com. And I'm also on Facebook as Peggy Joque Williams. Um, and I have an author page there. So those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me.
So go visit her website because then you'll find out so many other things
Mhm.
about her. And we thank you all so much. And thank you, Peggy, for being on. And I hope when you do get in touch with Peggy, you will tell her that you met her
Mhm.
on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? See you next week, everybody.
Thank you,
Bye.
Karen.